In the middle of the most chaotic concert in Beatles history, with 55,000 fans shrieking so loud the band couldn't even hear themselves play, Paul McCartney did something that made the entire stadium fall silent. He stopped the music and walked off stage. What happened next wasn't just captured in one of the most iconic photographs of the 1960s, it revealed the exact moment 4 young men trapped inside the prison of Beatlemania remembered who they really were. But what could make the biggest band in the world risk everything to break character in front of millions? And why did this single act of compassion change the way they saw their own fame forever? August 15th, 1965. Shea Stadium, New York City. The air itself seems to vibrate. 55,000 voices merge into a single, deafening roar that drowns out everything. The traffic on the Grand Central Parkway, the airplanes overhead, even thought itself. Inside this cauldron of sound, 4 young men in matching tailored jackets stand on a makeshift platform near second base, dwarfed by the sheer scale of what surrounds them. Their mop-top haircuts catch the stage lights, creating halos that make them look almost celestial against the ocean of faces stretching into darkness. Paul McCartney grips his Hofner bass, fingers moving across strings he can barely hear. To his left, John Lennon leans into a microphone, mouth-forming words that disappear the moment they leave his lips. George Harrison's guitar solo might as well be mime. Ringo Starr pounds his Ludwig drum kit with the fury of a man trying to break through a concrete wall. The Vox amplifiers, state-of-the-art, supposedly powerful enough to fill any venue, are pathetically inadequate here. They might as well be whispering into a hurricane. The heat is oppressive. August in New York, humidity thick enough to taste, made worse by the stage lights beating down on them like a second sun. Sweat runs down their faces, soaking the collars of their white shirts beneath their tailored jackets. Their jackets, perfectly pressed 2 hours ago, now cling to their bodies. But they keep smiling, keep moving, keep performing, because that's what they do. That's what's expected. In the front rows, teenage girls press against metal barriers, their faces contorted in expressions somewhere between ecstasy and agony. Some are crying, others have their mouths open in perpetual wails, no sound distinguishable from the rest. A girl in the third row has fainted, her limp body being passed overhead by the crowd toward waiting medics. Another clutches a homemade sign so tightly her knuckles have gone white. The sign reads, "Marry me, Paul," in letters that took hours to paint. Security guards form a thin human chain, leaning back against the surge, their faces tight with the knowledge that this crowd could overwhelm them in seconds. Behind them, more faces rise in tears, a human amphitheatre that seems to curve up into infinity. From the dugout, Brian Epstein watches with the fixed smile of a man holding a live grenade. His suit is immaculate, his hair perfectly combed, but his knuckles are white where he grips the concrete wall. This is his creation, his boys, his vision, his carefully constructed empire of charm and merchandising and coordinated choreography. But it's grown into something else now, something he can no longer control. One wrong move, one collapsed barrier, one stampede, and it all comes crashing down. He's seen it before in smaller venues, the madness that turns a concert into a riot. He's watched police struggle to maintain order in cities across America. This is bigger than all of those combined. On stage, Paul glances at John. Their eyes meet for half a second, an entire conversation compressed into a look. This is what they do now. This is what they've become. Not musicians, but symbols. Not artists, but products. They could be playing "Mary Had a Little Lamb" and the response would be identical. The music doesn't matter anymore. Only the spectacle matters. Only the image of 4 young men in pressed stage clothes, perfectly groomed, eternally smiling, forever young. But tonight an energy feels different. There's a charge in the air beyond the usual electricity of Beatlemania, a sense that the machinery is running too fast, that the gears are starting to strip, that something has to give. They've been on the road for 34 days, 26 cities, a blur of hotels and airports and chaos and smiling and waving and singing songs no one can hear. John's throat feels like he's been swallowing glass. Every morning he wakes up and has to remember where he is. Philadelphia? Toronto? Some other identical venue with identical crowds and identical security briefings? His voice is shot. Not that anyone notices. Not that anyone cares. They're not here for the music. They're here for the idea of the Beatles, the fantasy of the Beatles, the perfectly packaged product that Brian and the record company have built. Paul's fingers have blisters on top of calluses. His bass weighs 1,000 pounds. He moves across the stage with the same choreographed steps they've performed 100 times, his smile as fixed and false as a department store mannequin. He's 23 years old and feels 50. Last night, a girl threw her hotel room key toward the platform. The night before, someone threw underwear. The night before that, a shoe. They don't see him as human anymore. They see him as something to possess, to consume, to shriek at until their voices give out. George stands to the side, his jaw tight, his guitar hanging from his shoulder like a millstone. He joined a band to make music, to create something meaningful. To explore the possibilities of sound and harmony and composition. Instead, he's a dancing bear in a jacket, performing the same 15 songs every night to audiences who can't hear a single note. His fingers move through chord progressions by muscle memory alone. His mind is somewhere else, India maybe, where he's heard music exist that actually matters. That means something beyond marketing and merchandising. Ringo hits his drums harder than necessary, channeling his frustration into every beat. Sweat runs down his face, stinging his eyes, soaking the collar of his white shirt beneath his tailored jacket. He's the only one who can compete with the hysteria, but even his drums are swallowed by the sheer volume of human noise. He thinks about Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, his old band, playing small clubs in Liverpool where people actually listened, where you could hear someone shout a request, where music was a conversation, not a one-way broadcast into the void. They're prisoners. That's what they are. Prisoners of their own success, trapped inside these matching uniforms, these haircuts, this carefully maintained image of 4 cheeky lads from Liverpool who just want to hold your hand, but they can't hold anyone's hand. They can't touch anyone. They can't even see anyone. Just an undifferentiated mass of frenzied faces that blurs together into a single entity, demanding everything and offering nothing in return. Brian watches from the dugout, calculating. They have 8 more cities on this tour, then the recording sessions for the next album, then the next tour, then the next album. The machine never stops. It can't stop. Too many people depend on it. Record executives, promoters, merchandisers, the press, the fans themselves who've built their entire identities around loving the Beatles. To stop would be to disappoint millions. To stop would be failure. On stage, John hits a wrong chord. No one notices. Paul's voice cracks on a high note. No one cares. They could stop playing entirely and the hysteria would continue. The transformation is complete, from musicians to cymbals standing in the light. But sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, humanity breaks through. The opening chords of Twist and Shout cut through the wall of sound, or try to. John leans into the microphone, his voice already ragged, pushing through the deafening roar. Paul's bass line thumps beneath it all, a heartbeat lost in chaos. George's guitar weaves through the melody while Ringo drives the rhythm forward with mechanical precision. They're halfway through the set, running on autopilot, their bodies performing while their minds drift somewhere far from this stadium, this city, this life. Then movement catches Paul's eye. Not the usual surge of fans pressing against barriers, not another fainting girl being carried out by medics, but something different, something wrong. A small figure has broken through the security line, not a teenager but a child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, wearing a pale dress that stands out like a beacon against the dark mass of the crowd. She's stumbled onto the field and she's not shrieking with joy, she's sobbing. Paul's fingers freeze on the bass strings. The note dies. John notices first, his head turning toward Paul, then following his gaze, his rhythm guitar drops away. George looks up from his fretboard, confused, then sees what they're seeing. Ringo's drumbeat continues for 2 more measures before he realizes he's playing alone. The music collapses, just stops, dies in mid-phrase like a record player unplugged. The silence that follows isn't immediate. It ripples outward from the stage in waves. The front row's quiet first, bewildered, looking at each other, then at the platform where the Beatles stand motionless. The silence spreads backward through the stadium, row by row, section by section, until 55,000 people are holding their breath, trying to understand what's happening. For the first time all night, the stadium can hear itself. The shuffle of feet, The rustle of programs, someone's cough echoing off the upper deck. The little girl stands motionless in the spotlight, maybe 20 feet from the platform. Her ivory dress is rumpled, her hair dishevelled. Tears stream down her face, reflecting the stage lights. She's turned around in circles, looking for something, someone, her small arms wrapped around herself. Security guards are moving toward her, but they're moving slowly, uncertain, glancing at the platform for guidance. The crowd watches, transfixed. This isn't part of the show. This isn't choreographed. This is real. Paul looks at John. John looks at George. George looks at Ringo. No words pass between them, but something does. A recognition, an understanding, a decision made in the space between heartbeats. They've been performing for so long, playing their roles so perfectly, that they've forgotten what it feels like to simply react as human beings to something happening in front of them. But this child, lost and terrified in the middle of this circus, has cut through all the pageantry and pretense. She's not here for the Beatles. She doesn't care about their music or their fame or their meticulously constructed image. She's just scared. Paul sets his bass down carefully, the instrument settling against its stand with a soft thunk that echoes through the PA system. The sound is shockingly loud in the silence. He takes a step forward, then another, moving toward the edge of the stage. John follows, then George, then Ringo standing from behind his kit. 4 young men in matching jackets moving in unison, but not because it's choreographed, because it's right. The crowd remains silent, watching. Brian Epstein stands paralysed in the dugout, his carefully planned show dissolving before his eyes, but even he doesn't move to stop it. The little girl sees them coming and takes a step back, uncertain, overwhelmed by these 4 famous strangers approaching her. Paul kneels at the edge of the platform, bringing himself down to her level. He extends his hand, and when he speaks, his voice is soft, meant only for her, though the microphones catch fragments of it. "Hey there, love. Are you lost?" The little girl nods, her tears flowing harder now that someone's finally paying attention. Paul glances back at the others. John has grabbed a bottle of water from near the amps, George stands with his hands in his pockets looking suddenly awkward in his jacket, and Ringo has moved to the front of the platform, his face creased with genuine concern. These 4 men who've been screamed at by millions, who've been mobbed and chased and treated like gods, find themselves standing before an overwhelmed child who just needs help. Paul climbs down from the platform, not a dramatic leap, but a careful, deliberate step down onto the field. His polished shoes touch the grass of Shea Stadium, and something shifts. He's no longer performing. He's no longer playing the role of Paul McCartney of the Beatles. He's just Paul, a 23-year-old man who knows what it feels like to be lost and scared and wanting someone to make it better. He walks toward the girl slowly, non-threateningly, and kneels in the grass, ruining his expensive jacket. "What's your name?" he asks quietly. The stadium leans in, trying to hear, but his words are just for her. She mumbles something through her tears. He nods like it's the most important thing he's ever heard. "That's a lovely name. Are you here with your dad?" Another nod. "Okay, we're going to find him. I promise." John has climbed down now too, water bottle in hand. He approaches from the side, his movements gentle, and offers it to her. She takes it with small, trembling hands. George and Ringo remain under the lights, but their presence is different now, no longer performers on a platform but witnesses to something real and unrehearsed. The crowd watches in absolute silence. Camera flashes pop sporadically, capturing this moment that will become more famous than any song they've played tonight. Paul looks out at the sea of faces, shading his eyes against the lights. "Can we get some help here?" he calls out, his voice amplified by the microphone still live at their positions. "We're looking for this little girl's father." Security is already moving, radios crackling. Someone in the front section stands up, a man, frantic, pushing through the crowd. The barriers part for him. Ringo lifts the girl gently and she doesn't resist. She wraps her arms around his neck, her pale dress dark against his dark jacket, and he carries her toward the approaching man like she's made of glass. The father reaches them, breathless and crying himself, and Ringo passes her over carefully. The man is thanking them, words tumbling over each other, but Paul just puts a hand on his shoulder. "It's all right, mate, just keep hold of her, yeah?" They stand there for a moment, the Beatles and this ordinary father and his daughter, in the middle of Shea Stadium. surrounded by 55,000 people who aren't screaming anymore. They're watching 4 young men in press jackets being human, being kind, being something more than the product they've been packaged as. Paul reaches out and touches the girl's hand one more time. "You take care, love. Enjoy the show." As they climb back to their positions, the applause starts. Not screaming, not hysteria, but genuine applause. The sound of appreciation for meaning beyond performance. John picks up his guitar. Paul straps on his bass. George adjusts his amp. Ringo settles behind his drums. They look at each other, and a weight has lifted in their eyes. Some connection has been restored. They launch into the next song, and this time it feels different. The crowd is still loud, still enthusiastic, but there's a quality to it now that wasn't there before. The shift is palpable, from screaming at cymbals to celebrating people. The music still can't be heard properly over the noise, but somehow it doesn't matter as much. Because for a few precious minutes in the middle of the biggest spectacle of their careers, 4 young men remembered what it felt like to just be 4 young men who gave a damn about something real. The newspapers the next morning don't lead with the usual headlines about Beatlemania and screaming fans. They run the photograph, Ringo holding the little girl in her pale dress, the others gathered around, all of them looking like ordinary people doing an extraordinary thing. Years later, when the Beatles have broken up and gone their separate ways, when they're asked about the touring years and the madness of fame, they'll all remember that night at Shea Stadium. The reason wasn't the record-breaking attendance or the historic venue. It was the moment the music stopped and they found themselves again. Because of the little girl who reminded them that beneath the jackets and the haircuts and the carefully managed image, they were still just 4 lads from Liverpool who knew what it meant to care. That night, they weren't prisoners of fame. They were free.